Good morning. I'm Brian Chung in for Joe and Savannah. It's great to be with you. We start this hour, though, with Hurricane Erin's march up the East Coast. Hatteras, North Carolina, is starting to pick up the pieces after Erin's powerful waves washed away dunes, flooded highways, and damaged homes along the coast. After battering North Carolina's Outer Banks, Erin's effects are still being felt further north in places like Norfolk, Virginia, and Ocean City, Maryland, where flooding has closed several roads. Erin has now set its sights on New Jersey, where the Garden State is now under a state of emergency as strong winds brought down power lines. This morning, first responders are out in force along the coast trying to keep people safe and out of the water as Hurricane Erin creates heavy waves and powerful rip currents.
If you're not a lifeguard, you don't have fins, you don't know what you're doing, you should not be in the water at all.
NBC News meteorologist Angie Lastman is here with the forecast. But first, NBC's Erin McLaughlin is in New Jersey with the latest.
Hey there, Hurricane Erin may be churning hundreds of miles away from here, but she's been wreaking havoc up and down the eastern seaboard from the mid-Atlantic to New England, leaving dangerous conditions behind. Yesterday here in New Jersey, the governor declared a state of emergency. Overnight high tides pushed water into coastal towns here, flooding streets in Margate County. Get this, fire officials say overnight they rescued at least 50 people stuck in rising waters. And then further south, Maryland and Delaware beach towns were also inundated. And in North Carolina, Erin's closest approach left entire neighborhoods in the Outer Banks flooded. The main highway there is still shut down this morning. And spare a thought for the sea turtles in Emerald Isle, North Carolina. Their nests along the water's edge under threat due to Hurricane Erin. Officials now racing to save them. Here in New Jersey, the big concern today, it's just absolutely beautiful outside. The sun is shining, and they're worried that these conditions will tempt people back into those waters where potentially deadly rip currents remain. They say don't go into the water. Red flags are expected to stay in place through Saturday. Back to you.
Erin McLaughlin, thanks so much. Now let's bring in NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman, who's got a closer look at Hurricane Erin's impact on our weekend weather. Angie, good morning. As she was saying, it looks beautiful out there, but there's some real risks.
Yeah, and we're going to see those improved conditions. Good morning, Brian. We've got still like a hurricane on our hands, but it is moving away. So that's where the positives come in, when it takes most of those threats away, but we still do have some lingering effects. So let's get you those details. The latest that we have, 90-mile-per-hour winds, so that makes it a Category 1 hurricane, and it's moving northeast at a pretty good pace, 22 miles per hour. That northeast movement means out of here it goes, no longer impacting most of us across the East Coast, but leaving a couple of lingering effects as it continues to weaken through the weekend. As we look at our coastal impacts, the first thing on deck is the flooding concerns. Yesterday, forecast verified pretty good. We saw some inundation anywhere from 2 to 4 feet across parts of the mid-Atlantic, and we're going to see that kind of improve through the day today, but I wouldn't be surprised if we still have some minor flooding out there. Wherever you see these kind of orange dots, that's minor flooding. We've got some moderate flooding happening across a couple of spots as well. So maybe some water still on the roadways and still some potential road closures across this region. But again, this is going to improve here as the day goes on. What doesn't seem to improve as we get into the first half of our weekend, at least, are those rip current risks. That's going to stay with us. Notice the high risk up and down the East Coast. I know it's a busy kind of late summer weekend where a lot of folks want to get to the coast, but making sure you're heeding those lifeguard warnings and noticing that there will be red flag warnings up and down the beach is going to be key for safety this weekend for the East Coast. As far as our wind gusts go, we saw yesterday some impressive gusts, 30, 40, 50 plus miles per hour wind gusts. Not the case so much now, but it is still going to be kind of breezy and a little gusty at some points. Notice Nantucket, we're expecting a peak wind gust through tomorrow into the high 30s. Places like Montauk, Long Beach, Atlantic City, you're going to be a little breezy as well, 20 plus mile per hour winds. So just something to note if you're going to be near the coast. Otherwise, on the other side of the country, we've got heat alerts to talk about. 47 million people, and it's not just the desert areas. It's up and down, basically, the West Coast from top to bottom, where we see temperatures headed into the 90s, and if not 90s, they're into the triple digits. Medford, expect 106 for your high temperature today. We've got 111, Brian, in Phoenix. These temperatures going to be oppressive, and unfortunately, not a whole lot of relief as we get into your Saturday as well, and we'll keep that fire risk for Southern California, too.
Wow, a heat dome on the West Coast, but it felt like fall in New York yesterday.
Yes, and
it was windy,
honestly,
and
the Northeast is going to have a lot of sunshine too, so that kind of dial back of our temperatures, a whole lot of sunshine. It'll make for a pretty good weekend as long as you're staying out of the water.
Any fun plans for the weekend?
Oh, I'm actually going to the shore, so
whoa,
I will not be in the water.
I was going to say, yeah, watch out for those rip currents. Always swim sideways. Angie Lastman, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Well, let's now shift to Washington, where President Trump is touting his recent crackdown on crime. On Thursday, the president joined law enforcement officials and National Guard members who he deployed to the streets of D.C. in a patrol of the city. He commended their efforts and the safety of the nation's capital.
Everybody's safe now. Everybody feels safe. And this Capitol is right now, after 4 days, 5 days, it's at a level that you haven't seen in a long time, and it's all because of you.
The president also taking something of a victory lap after a big legal win yesterday. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, who joins us now with all that and more. Monica, good morning. Let's start off about the president's visit with the National Guard troops and federal officers. Obviously, this has been part of the federal effort from the White House to try to crack down on crime in D.C., but have crime rates improved as much as he says they have?
Well, it's hard to really tell, Brian, in this short amount of time, but the White House says yes. And remember, this is the same White House and Department of Justice that is now actually investigating D.C. police data because they don't believe what the current statistics reflect, which is a 30-year low in violent crime. So they are looking into that matter because they say that that wasn't true, and that is why the president ordered this federal crackdown of the district, which is within his authority, at least temporarily. The question is, how long will this go on? And by any indication, the fact that he continues to bring in so many National Guard troops and so many federal agents are detailed to this effort, it does seem it could go on for weeks, potentially months, but he would need to declare a national crime emergency to extend it beyond 30 days unless he gets congressional approval. But this is a real priority for the president, and that's why the White House says he wanted to get out there and greet the law enforcement personnel and the troops in person. He wanted to thank them. It came a day after Vice President Vance had gone to Union Station and was met with some protesters and hecklers there because he was in a public area. But President Trump went to a heavily secured area where U.S. Park Police have been stationed. Brian.
Yeah, the president trying to take a victory lap there, although, as you point out, not necessarily clear yet on the results as far as crime in D.C. But what is true is that he did get a big legal victory after a New York appeals court dismissed the $500 million civil fraud penalty against him. That was a huge penalty at the time. What explanation did the court provide for this decision? And how is New York Attorney General Letitia James, who brought the case against him, responding?
Yeah, Brian, and this was a 320-page opinion in which actually the judges were divided. Two of them said that essentially there should be a new trial in this. One wanted to throw it out altogether. And then another was saying, in effect, and ultimately this is what ruling was, what did go forward, that that penalty was excessive, that it was too much money, the more than $500 million. So they're throwing that out while the judgment of fraud in this case against the president, against the Trump organization and his two sons, that still stands. And so that's why you have the New York Attorney General Letitia James saying that she's going to appeal the court's ruling. And she wrote in her statement, in effect, that because the court did rule that the president violated the law, she believes the case has merit. So that will continue from there. But it is a big victory in the sense that that $500 million penalty has now been thrown out.
Yeah, $500 million. Well, let's now turn to the Supreme Court, if we may, Monica, because they're allowing his administration to move forward with cuts to grants that are totaling nearly $800 million to the National Institutes of Health. So walk us through the justice's reasoning there, and what does that mean for researchers at the NIH?
So basically, they allowed a lower court to stand in this case, and that is part of the president, the Trump administration's effort to eliminate so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion practices when it comes to these research grants. They want to take that out. And remember, that was a big priority when the president took office earlier this year. So this has worked its way through the courts. And now the Supreme Court, again, is allowing that to stand. But there was a portion of this ruling that will still play out in the lower courts. And so it's possible that this could change again. But this is, in effect, right now, telling those researchers and saying that those grants cannot continue to be paid out from the National Institute of Health. So this is something that the Trump administration had been pushing for, but again, has to continue its legal process.
Yeah, and could have wide-ranging implications for the types of research that they do there. Monica Alba, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Well, later this morning, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is expected to deliver an important speech which could weigh on the interest rates that you pay. The high-stakes speech, which will be also closely watched by markets, is part of an annual meeting hosted by the Kansas City Federal Reserve in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And all of this comes at a tumultuous time for the tariff-dogged economy and also comes with the political rip currents of pressure from President Trump to lower interest rates. NBC News business and economy reporter Emily Lorsch is here to break down what to expect. Emily, it's great to see you this morning.
It's great to see you as well. Good morning, Brian.
So let's talk about what we should expect to hear. I know that you don't have a crystal ball into what the Fed chairman's going to say, but any clues on what he might deliver in this speech?
Brian, it's a review that occurs every 5 years, and there's a lot of suspense at this moment of exactly what the chairman will say and how far he'll go. He's expected to use this speech to address the economic outlook and talk about the central bank's longer-term balancing act between fighting inflation and unemployment. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the Federal Reserve is set to revise its policy framework away from its approach in 2020, the last time this speech was made. And Powell is expected to lay out those changes. But all eyes and ears will be open as investors will be listening closely for any clues that Powell may offer about a possible rate cut at the next Fed policy meeting in just a few weeks in September. After cutting its benchmark rate by a full percentage point last year, the Fed has held interest rates steady since December. That's even though President Trump has put pressure on the Fed to cut rates and has gone after Powell with attack after attack. Inflation is still running above the Fed's 2% target, and many Fed policymakers are worried that President Trump's sweeping tariffs could put more upward pressure on prices. Holding rates steady could act as an insurance policy to help keep inflation in check. On the other hand, the labor market is showing signs of weakening, which argues for lower rates. Powell and his colleagues have to soon decide which of two significant risks takes priority now, with the Fed's goals of low, stable inflation and high employment being in tension with each other. How much we'll learn today, though, Brian, will be decided, and we'll have to just wait and see. We can't really, like you said, we can't really predict.
Yeah, well, there's that balancing act, as you point out, between inflation and unemployment. But how are we expecting this speech to be different from years past?
Well, first of all, Brian, this is going to be Powell's final keynote address in Jackson Hole as chairman, and we're expecting a very different keynote from 5 years ago. Think about it. 2020 we were in a pandemic, right? So the Fed wanted to really stimulate the economy, and so the Fed was okay with inflation being a bit above its 2% target. Since then, we've seen high inflationary periods where, as you know, you've been covering
Yep.
President Trump's sweeping tariffs and then also a weakening labor market. So we're in a very different economic environment right now. So economists are really expecting the framework to be very different from what was laid out 5 years ago.
Yeah, economists are saying, and I've been hearing that, they're just like, this is a really, really difficult moment for the Fed, not just for all those reasons that you outlined with the tariffs, but also because of the political pressure. But let's talk about what markets are expecting. They're expecting a rate cut. And even some members inside the Fed are saying, hey, we think there is reason for a Fed rate cut here. But what matters is the top dog, Jerome Powell. Do we expect him to kind of say one way or another whether or not a rate cut is coming in that next meeting in September?
Investors are certainly going to have their eyes and ears peeled. They're hoping for some sort of a clue or some sort of an indication of a monetary policy shift. As you know, Powell in the past has given some of those hints in the past during his speeches. But, Brian, that's not really the point of what we're expecting today. Economists really are expecting an overall economic outlook.
Higher level.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. And a framework for the next 5 years.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. I know one person that will probably be watching is President Donald Trump.
Definitely.
Emily Lorsch, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, the redistricting battles playing out in red and blue states across the country are escalating this morning. California's Democratic-controlled legislature quickly passed a set of bills on Thursday that paves the way for a special election this fall that would give voters a say in approving or rejecting the party's plans to gerrymander the state's congressional map. It comes as Texas is on the verge of redrawing its own maps, and the Senate committee there advancing its redistricting bill yesterday, sending it to the full Republican majority Senate for approval. For more on this, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, good morning. Let's start in California. What exactly are people in that state voting on when it becomes that ballot measure in November?
Well, it'll be up to voters, Brian, on November 4th to decide whether they will accept these partisan maps that lean heavily in the direction of Democrats after Governor Gavin Newsom signed those proposals passed by his state legislature yesterday. And look, this proposal is intended to be partisan. Is it intended to be the next chess move in this game of chess launched by Republicans after President Trump pushed Texas Governor Greg Abbott to redraw the maps in his state, which we saw happen, of course, this week? Governor Abbott could sign that as soon as today after the Senate passes it. But in terms of California, this is going to be up to the voters. And look, it's intended to be temporary because after the 2030 census, the maps are intended to go back to the nonpartisan drawings that they were before Governor Newsom made this move. I want you to take a listen to what he had to say yesterday. Watch this.
This is not an election we expected to be holding on November 4th, but they shot the first bullet. They took an action in Texas and were responding to it. This was not an organized effort. This was a reaction to an assault on our democracy in Texas, and we're going to continue to support those that are of like mind to get the vote out and to get the word about what this is all about.
So basically, the bottom line is Democrats stand to gain up to 5 seats in that state after Republicans stand to gain 5 seats in Texas after that is fully signed into law. But here's the thing. Republican legislators, lawmakers here in D.C. that I've been talking to, some of them in California have been trying to appeal to their state lawmakers there. We even heard from the Republican minority leader trying to say, look, quote, somebody has to refrain from striking back and show a better way. Clearly, Democrats aren't willing to play nice if Republicans aren't here.
So, Julie, let's go from Sacramento to Austin now in Texas. The redistricting plans there, I mean, it's basically going to happen. It's just a matter of when. So when should we expect to see this full Senate vote?
You're exactly right. It's basically a done deal at this point, and that's because, Brian, before we saw that dramatic 2-week standoff with House Democrats, Senate Democrats didn't push back in the same way in Texas. Of course, some of them did, but the bottom line is they already passed a version of this map before. Now that the House passed it, the Senate has to pass it again. It did pass out of a committee yesterday, advancing to the full floor. They're gaveling in at about 10 a.m. Eastern, a couple of hours from now, so they do expect to pass it today, and then Governor Greg Abbott said he will sign it into law. This effort has been widely praised by the president, who's been applauding the Texas lawmakers. This is also kind of viewed as a loyalty test to see how far all these people are willing to go. I think I shared with you yesterday, Brian, that when I was talking to a Democratic state lawmaker, Chris Turner, in Texas, he shared with me that he has had conversations with Republicans across the aisle who didn't want to support a partisan move like this, mid-decade gerrymandered redistricting, but they did, because this, of course, is viewed as another loyalty test for the president, one that he applauded and praised and said that he would move out to other red states, too.
Yeah, and while you mentioned that, there are also some high-profile figures that are talking about the redistricting battle kind of nationwide as well. We know the president is backing Texas, but now former President Barack Obama is also weighing in.
Oh, Obama is very supportive of this effort. He is encouraging Democrats to fight back. And this is really a pivotal moment when you think about the 2024 election for Democrats. It didn't go well. That is an understatement. And they're really still trying to soul search and find their direction. But, man, we saw just the crowds in the Austin State Capitol, protesters, people largely supportive of how Democrats have gone about this. Not many want them to refrain. Of course, some Democrats do, as do some Republicans, because the reality is they stand to be drawn out of their districts, at least in some states, in some cases. But Barack Obama, the former president, very supportive of this effort. Other Democrats nationwide as well. And remember, these Democrats in Texas, they went on the road intentionally. Not only did they speak with Governor Gavin Newsom in California, but they also met with Kathy Hochul in New York, Governor Pritzker in Illinois, and they want other blue states to follow suit as well, because, as I mentioned, this doesn't end with Texas. President Trump promised to push the Missouri state legislature, to push Indiana to do something similar as well.
Wow, gerrymandering, it seems like arms war happening among the states. Julie Sirkin, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Well, alongside the redistricting changes, Texas Republicans have also been fighting another controversial battle in their state. GOP leaders are pushing to revive a so-called bathroom bill that would require people to use public restrooms according to their assigned sex at birth. That bill passed the Senate and will be in front of a House committee today. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins me now with more on this. Ali, it's great to have you on the show. This is the latest in a long string of anti-LGBTQ plus laws that have been pushed by Republicans in the Lone Star State. And it's that trend toward restrictions that's stoking fear among families, so much so that one has made the tough decision to leave not just Texas, but the United States altogether. What is all this about?
It means that this one family that I spoke to exclusively, Brian, feared so much for their family, their security, that they made the tough call not just to leave the place that they've called home for so long, their entire lives, but instead to leave the country altogether.
15-year-old Libby Gonzalez is a lot of things.
She steals my clothes more than I steal hers.
No, I don't. That is so not true.
A sister, daughter, friend, and she's trans in Texas, a state that's one of the most restrictive in the country.
I love being here and I love my friends, and despite everything that's wrong with our state, I love it here.
So why are you leaving?
Because it's no longer safe for us.
So the Gonzalez family is leaving.
Already crying.
Not just Texas, but America.
I don't think it's one last straw. It was a buildup. We decided as a family that the onslaught that we knew was coming with this administration was going to make an environment far too unsafe for our family to stay here.
Where are you going?
Well, we're not sharing where we're going because my kids deserve a fresh start. We deserve safety.
It's a choice Rachel knows most other families like theirs can't make.
The majority of people don't have the means to up and leave. And this is why we need allies to step up.
The Gonzalez family knows the fight. When Texas considered a bathroom bill in 2017, Libby, then just 7 years old, testified in Austin.
I am 7 years old and I am transgender.
As Libby's gotten older, Texas has passed other restrictions, including a 2021 ban on trans girls in sports.
She's not a competitive athlete, but she wanted to be able to do the things that her classmates and friends were doing, and that was taken away.
In 2022, Governor Greg Abbott instructed the state's child welfare agency to investigate parents and doctors who provide gender-affirming care for trans youth, equating it to child abuse. That's temporarily blocked now by a court injunction.
If that moves, my husband and I will be criminalized for supporting our daughter and making the very best parenting decisions that we possibly can. How can we stay here knowing that that's a potential?
In the wake of their departure, the very bathroom bill that sparked Livy's activism in the first place is back in front of lawmakers.
It's just really annoying to see how all of my entire childhood just...
In recent years, Texas has become an epicenter for the national fight over trans rights, reaching a fever pitch with this ad from 2024.
Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
That left Democrats splintered on the issue.
Can a man become a woman?
Can a man become a woman? No.
Thank you.
Trans Americans are not the problem. This obsession with monitoring kids' genitals is absolutely the problem.
Reaction to the Gonzalez family story also mixed on the street in Dallas.
That is sad. My brother and his husband have also thought about doing the same thing because it's just not. They feel like they're being targeted.
I'm not against trans, okay?
Yeah.
But God put us on earth, man and woman, not for trans.
We're supposed to be a country that welcomes everybody.
That political debate, a deeply personal one, as Libby prepares for what's next.
What does it feel like that you have to leave now?
It feels disappointing, frustrating, knowing that so many people don't think that I should be allowed to be like anyone else. Like, I don't deserve to have the rights that everyone else has.
And Brian, Rachel told me that she wanted to tell this story to just show people how this issue is more than just politics. It's one that's shaping the course of their families' lives. I've spoken to the Gonzalez family since we taped this. They have moved and they're settling into their new home, getting ready for back to school. They said they were sad to leave the home that they'd always known, but there was also some hope in our conversation about a fresh start, being in a place that's more pro-trans, has better access to health care, but also doesn't have them worrying about how every special session or executive order could limit or restrict Libby's life.
Wow, some really powerful reporting there. Thank you so much for bringing that to us, Ali Vitale. Appreciate it. Well, in California, the Menendez brothers have been dealt a major blow in their fight for freedom. A parole board denied Eric's bid for release yesterday, ruling that he should not be released from prison. And in a hearing that lasted nearly 10 hours, Eric argued his case remotely from the San Diego County prison where they are currently being held. His brother Lyle is set to appear before the parole board today. All of this coming after a Los Angeles judge resentenced both brothers to 50 years to life in prison for the murders of their parents back in 1989. I'm here with NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas for more on this. Danny, good morning. It's great to have you here. So yesterday's hearing, it was a long one, right? Like 10 hours. That's a substantial amount of time. Why did they end up rejecting Eric's bid for parole after all of that time?
It was based on a number of factors, but based on some of the statements that were made there, the parole board was looking at his history while in prison. And while it was reported that he had some a cell phone usage that's against the rules, there were really some more incidents than that. Some potential violence, some potential disputes with other prisoners while in prison. And really, I mean, one of the things that stood out to me is Eric essentially said, well, during the time that I thought I was never getting out of prison, yeah, I broke some of the rules with cell phones because who cares? I mean, if I get in a little trouble, it's worth it to me. It was only after I found out that I had a shot at getting out that I was on my very best behavior. And obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but moments like that, and also moments where he essentially blamed his parents still. I wasn't raised with the right morals, essentially, was what he was saying. That doesn't look that good to a parole board that really is looking at issues of taking responsibility, accountability, and remorse. And I get that Eric still wants to maintain his innocence in case he gets a new trial, so he's walking a tightrope. But I don't think the parole board really bought what he was selling.
Well, I mean, Danny, the next natural question is that Eric is not Lyle. Eric has had his hearing. Lyle's hearing is today. Is there any reason to think that Lyle's hearing will end up differently than his brothers did yesterday?
Yeah, I try to go by the odds. I mean, just straight up, anybody walking into a California parole board hearing has about a 70% chance of not getting parole. But you're right in that the parole board will probably try to treat very similarly situated defendants or offenders similarly. But there is the possibility that Lyle may have a better prison record. He may have done less in the way of infractions. That's 30 years of a totally different history that might make the difference. But I expect, if you're going to bet, I think the odds are that both brothers will suffer the same fate.
But could it be a cell phones difference?
It could be cell phones. I mean, yes, but it's not just about cell phones. And by the way, as a criminal defense attorney, there is a bit of irony or silliness in this hearing, because if you're in prison for 30 years, you are going to use a cell phone. Believe me, every criminal defense attorney will tell you they get a call from an unknown number about once a week, and it's a against the rules cell phone call that exists in the gray area. I'm not admitting or denying anything, but this is a reality of life. So for a parole board to go in there and act haughty about somebody using a cell phone is a little unrealistic. But on the other hand, it does demonstrate that someone is still willing to break the rules.
Okay, quickly, what happens next? Because the parole board ruled that Eric won't be able to seek parole again for 3 years, but the brothers are still actively pursuing. What are their options here?
Exactly. So separately, they're pursuing what's called a habeas petition. They're basically asking for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence. I can tell you, as someone who files those, they have about a 1% chance. So a real long shot, although they do have some new evidence that you don't normally have. Separately, the parole board, 3 years until they come back, and then always they could get clemency from Governor Newsom. And by the way, whatever the parole board had decided, if they decided to parole them, that would have gone to Governor Newsom too. So Governor Newsom really has the power here.
Yeah, which we've been discussing throughout this entire process. But Danny Savalos, thank you so much for walking us through it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.